NFL Week 9 is upon us. Nick Whalen, John McKechnie here with you to break it all down here on the sports betting edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. John, we ripped through 16 games last week in under an hour. We're going to try to do the same this week. Not go too long-winded on some of these. We have an immense number of backup quarterbacks potentially starting this week. I'm in a pick'em league, where you do confidence points 1 through 16 each week. I've referenced that on the pod a bunch of times. We got the boys chat for all the guys that are in it. And this is consensus the toughest week of the year. And, as we always say, these are, in theory, 50-50 propositions. But the amount of uncertainty that we have at quarterback, we could have 11 teams starting a backup quarterback this week. And it could be up to 13 if you want to include, rookie quarterbacks in this. CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, who are kind of up and down in their own right. Can you remember a more chaotic week just in terms of quarterback play?
I think this morning alone is like one of the more ridiculous ones. Not only a night owl such as myself seeing Josh McDaniels get fired in real time at like 2 a.m. Eastern, and then we see the Aiden O'Connell news. We see Atlanta making the correct decision that we've been lobbying for all autumn long, them going to Taylor Heineke this week. The Vikings obviously having their own issues with Kirk Cousins going out for the season. That's absolutely brutal. Dobbs probably not going to be ready to roll this weekend, so we get treated to Jaron Hall against Taylor Heineke. So that'll be something to behold. I might have to see what the tickets look like for that game. I'll be back on Sunday, so might have to go get eyes on that guy. But beyond that, we saw Tommy DeVito play last week. Play in air quotes.
We saw him on the field.
Can confirm. I think his best moment was really just people circulating the Twitter pictures of him just kind of being like I don't know what in the Planet Fitness lore, being a lunk out there. But beyond that, this is it makes for this week being ridiculously tricky. We have 2 fewer games to play around with as well, with 4 teams being on bye. So this is going to be a battle. I think we're ready for it, though.
I think we are. We're coming off of a bounce back week in the Circa contest. We went 3-2. Lord knows, John, it should have been 4-1, man. That Baltimore 9.5. We had a bad number. I think it was down to 8 or 8.5 by kickoff, but we had to lock that in a little bit earlier in the week. And oh man, Josh Dobbs, Nelson Aguilar, they did everything they could to blow that one up.
The refs with that McBride not calling that play dead when he was so that play was over.
Yeah, I know. That to me that's like the fourth most thing I'm mad about in that game, which is just a terrible way to phrase that. But Aguilar, why is Nelson Aguilar even on your hands team? He's the opposite of somebody that you want on hands team. They were setting up for Nelson Aguilar to catch that. That was the plan. They put him in that position. It's not like he was out there accidentally. They were saying, all right, our goal here is to allow Nelson Aguilar to bring this in and secure the win. They were setting themselves up for failure. Literally, as soon as they lined up and we saw Aguilar out there, I texted you this is not going to go well. This is not going to go well. And of course, we got to give credit. Hell of an onside kick. That was about as good as it gets. But man, to see that one go down the way it did, the Cardinals didn't even operate it well. They ran too many plays. They ran all this time off the clock. I thought they were at that point just going to gun for the touchdown. They instead kicked the field goal, and we knew our fate was sealed at that point. But anyway, enough complaining about the past. We move on to week 9. We'll talk through some games we might use in Circa as we go game by game here. And those of you watching live, you will notice we're recording this on Wednesday, a day earlier than normal. I am, in fact, getting married this weekend, which is why we had to push it up. You're flying out tomorrow to come join the festivities. Cannot wait for that. So we apologize for those of you, who are used to watching us on Thursday, but hey, you get it a day early. All right. So we might not have quite as much injury news as we typically do, but we'll give you the same takes. And because we're recording this a day early, John, we could talk about Thursday Night Football. Let's start there. Titans, Steelers. Steelers 3-point favorites at home. It sounds to me like Kenny Pickett is at least going to try to play in this game. He's trending in the right direction. He's going to try to gut it out. I don't know that it really matters whether it's him or it's Mitch Trubisky, who we saw come in the second half against Jacksonville and pretty much immediately throw a terrible pick into triple coverage. Threw another pick on the last play of the game. Not really his fault. That was a Hail Mary scenario, kind of a false turnover there for Pittsburgh. On the other side, we got Will Levis. And I don't know what to make of Will Levis at this point, John. I faded him last week to my own peril. I thought that was, almost too good of a spot for Atlanta, catching Levis on his first start. And it turned out to be true. I mean, he single-handedly has resurrected DeAndre Hopkins.
That was unreal. I mean, I was setting my DFS lineups on Sunday morning, and as I'm going through the RotoWire optimizer, it keeps telling me play DeAndre Hopkins, and I keep telling it, no, I'm smarter than you, computer. The computer was smarter than me once again. One of these days I'll get it right, but that was just an electric debut from Will Levis. It looked even better in those uniforms, but now we see. I think I really like Pittsburgh in this spot because it's so visceral, the two comparisons between the two teams. Last week, Tennessee way exceeding expectations, and then you got Pittsburgh on the other side just being stuck in the mud the entirety of Sunday afternoon, both literally and figuratively. They lose Minkah Fitzpatrick during the course of that game as well. But Tennessee, I'm just not convinced. I think that it's interesting that like for props purposes, Levis's total is just like 200 yards, and it was 202 earlier today. So that seems to suggest that the books are not completely sold on Levis performing in this spot. And I think I'm just going to kind of follow that. And I know that Pittsburgh can be tricky to back as favorites. We like getting them as dogs more often, but in this spot at home, short week, I think Pittsburgh's the side.
Reluctantly, I'm with you. This feels like a spot where, Will Levis has kind of a come back down to earth game, and it's not really anything against him. It's just you don't really see a inexperienced rookie quarterback have two games like that, especially coming in relief in the middle of the year. I think they caught Atlanta off guard. Certainly DeAndre Hopkins did, and Will Levis caught everybody off guard, right? I mean, that was about the best case scenario. And if you rolled DFS or rolled Will Levis out there in a DFS lineup, you are probably sitting pretty right now, probably cashing those contests. I see Pittsburgh, slowing him down. I don't see, a 4-touchdown game where they're just ripping off, 40-plus yard passes left and right. These teams have combined to go under in 11 of their last 14 games. The total's all the way down at 36.5. So I think the implication is that Tennessee's offense does slow up here. But you mentioned the Minkah Fitzpatrick injury. That is huge. As soon as he went out, Jacksonville hit that big play down the sideline to Travis Etienne. Like they felt the absence of Minkah Fitzpatrick right away. We'll see how much time he ultimately misses. That looked like it could have been a fairly severe injury. I mean, he was down in a heap for a while. They ruled him out pretty quickly for this game. But yeah, we're going to be saying this, I think, about a lot of games, but this is one where you just kind of have to pick a side almost blindly. I mean, nothing would surprise me here. Certainly if Kenny Pickett plays at 80% and looks terrible and Tennessee wins this game like 17-10, I wouldn't be shocked. But I side with the Steelers here at home, and 3 is not an ideal number. You can find it at 2.5 at some other books. So make sure you shop around. If you're going to bet this game, BetMGM, FanDuel, PointsBet, all have it at 2.5, whereas it's 3 at DraftKings. But yeah, I can't really give a great reason why other than putting some faith in Mike Tomlin. Although like all the Mike Vrabel underdog stats are basically the same as Tomlin. So it's kind True. Of we kind of got like a dog off here between those two, but I side with the Steelers at home and just going to try not to overthink this one.
The public is 70% on Tennessee. You can't be 70% on Tennessee. Like you just can't.
No.
So therefore, just looking at those numbers, like I just almost as just an objective way of going about things. Like public bets obviously have been working out pretty well this year, but Tennessee, not one of those teams that like fall under that purview.
Yep. Looking forward to watching that one with all the boys tomorrow night, though. I'll tell you that. It's gonna be a banger. All right, so we fly from Pittsburgh now to Frankfurt, Germany, John, where we get Dolphins Chiefs. One of the games of the year, and great for the fans of Germany to get this one, but I don't love this being an 8:30 a.m. kickoff for me here in Central Time. Chiefs down to 1.5 point favorites. That number was at 2.5 earlier this week, so we got some movement in favor of Miami. Total is 50.5. Is this the week that the Dolphins could finally topple a good team?
This is brutal. I really wish this game wasn't in Germany. Germany has been treated to better matchups than the good folks of London. Last year you get Seattle playing. Seattle was ascending at the time over there, but when it comes to this game, yeah, that is the question, right? It's the Dolphins have absolutely taken the paint off of pretty much every middling to bad team that they've faced, and when they run into teams like the Bills when they were running hot, or the Eagles a couple weeks ago, it doesn't go as smoothly. But the Chiefs are coming off of one of the more shocking results of last weekend, not just not covering, but losing to Denver. I think that's the first time, since 2015, that the Chiefs
16 straight
lost.
was the streak, right?
Yes. So that it had been quite some time. And, what was that, a look ahead? Were they just kind of being sloppy, or are the Broncos maybe slightly better than we've been giving them credit for? They might be. There's the interesting statistical comparison going around where Russ actually has better numbers than Mahomes thus far this season. But I think bottom line here, I'm worried about the Dolphins defense. And I know that the Chiefs offense hasn't been what we're accustomed to. I know that they don't have the receiving personnel outside of Kelsey that really scares anybody. I mean, you got MVS, you got a rookie in Rashee Rice and Mecole Hardman, who just rejoined the team a couple weeks ago. But I think Kelsey is just going to be such an issue for this Dolphins team. I think that the strength of the Dolphins secondary is probably at corner. You're not going to stick a corner on Kelsey necessarily because he's just going to overpower him. I think that the Chiefs are going to be able to run the ball. So that, combined with the fact that I think the Chiefs have like a top 10-ish defense, they're going to be able to keep enough of a lid on this on this Dolphins passing attack. And I don't think the Dolphins are going to be able to run extremely well. So I do like the Chiefs in this spot, and I like that the numbers dropping a little bit.
Yeah, same here. Chiefs are 16-3 straight up after a loss in the Patrick Mahomes era. So I'm inclined to go KC here as well. I mean, part of me thinks like the Dolphins are due to finally win one of these games against a good team. And, this is kind of the third time that they're getting a game like this on the road. I know it's neutral site, but, for once, I think they'd like to welcome one of these teams into Miami. We'll see some of those games later this season. But, yeah, I'm with you on KC. And ironically, it's because of the defense. It's not like I see, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, outscoring the Dolphins. Like if Miami's in the 30s here, that worries me, right? Like I think it has to be kind of the script that we saw against Philly and against Buffalo, where it's the defense, kind of suffocating Miami and holding them under 30. If this turns into a shootout, I think I trust the Dolphins more, but I lean KC here. So that is our lean on the Germany game. We'll see if we want to include that one in Circa. I think KC at 1.5 is a pretty juicy number. Let's move on to the Sunday slate, John. And this begins with Vikings-Falcons. We know for sure that this will be a backup quarterback pool. There's no way around it. We got Taylor Heineke starting for the Atlanta Falcons. They are 4.5-point favorites at home. It sounds like it's going to be Jaren Hall for Minnesota. I don't think Josh Dobbs is going to quite be up to speed. Kevin O'Connell hinted that, Dobbs could be available, if they need him, could have some plays for him. It also could be a situation where Hall is just a disaster. And then we see Josh Dobbs tossed in there, in the second half. Totals all the way down at 37. I think that makes sense. We got a bunch of games in that range this week. Giants, Raiders, Cardinals, Browns hanging around there as well. 4.5 is tough for me. I'm almost more worried that Josh Dobbs comes in. Like that to me is what could kind of push me in favor of Minnesota. But for the second straight week here, I think I have to go Atlanta, even though they burned us in this spot last week. They're at home. They always play better at home. I like this team better with Heineke than I do Desmond Ridder. Just not having to deal with that for the first half. That pushes me in favor of the Falcons. And we just don't know with Jaren Hall. I think you probably know more about him, having watched him at the college level at BYU. But I thought we saw a very, very limited offense once he came in. Granted, they're up 2 scores. They're kind of just trying to round out the clock at that point. But this seems like it could be a spot where Minnesota struggles to get to like 250 yards total.
Right. I think that this is Jaren Hall as a as like a project in the long run is pseudo interesting. Maybe he could develop into like a top 20-ish, 25-ish, type of starter down the line, but he's certainly not ready right now. And he had impressive production during his time at BYU. Was active as a runner and has a strong arm to execute the downfield stuff. But I just wonder how it translates to this level because he doesn't really have the prototypical frame. I'm not sure the arm is quite going to work the same way that it did in college. So this could be a pretty brutal spot for Jaren Hall against a Falcons defense that, fool me once, shame on me type of deal. Like they saw it, they got ambushed by Levis last week. It's not going to happen again 2 weeks in a row. They're at home. I like the Falcons in this spot a good bit. I know 4.5 it's hard to trust a team that just does not score that much with that many points, but I think that the Vikings are kind of like officially on shutout watch here.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the play. I think we have to just assume that Jaron Hall is not going to be very good. I don't think we get a Levis situation out of him this week. I mean, I don't think the plan was for him to ever play a snap this year. Obviously, right? They wanted it to be Kirk Cousins, but Nick Mullins is also on IR. Like, it's not like Jaron Hall has been waiting in the wings here. I think he was just kind of a guy that they took a flyer on in the 5th round, and now he's thrust into this situation. Atlanta, yeah, they had the letdown last week, but still, top 12 defense on the year in terms of EPA. Very quietly, number 2 in the NFL, John, in pressure rate. And they're not even blitzing that much. I mean, they're blitzing at a below league average rate. And you start to put pressure on Jaron Hall. Minnesota's not going to be able to run the ball. I think this adds up to what will ultimately be a dicey and ugly Atlanta win, but a win and a cover nonetheless. So I'm on the Falcons here.
All right. Go Birds.
All right. Speaking of birds, we got a bird-on-bird matchup, John. Your Baltimore Ravens taking on the Seattle Seahawks at home. Ravens are 6-point favorites. Total is up at 43. Am I wrong to kind of like Seattle here? I think this is a slightly bigger number than it should be. Like I had this game at like 4.5, 5 in favor of Baltimore. Certainly they're the better team. No question. They're the number 1 defense in the NFL. They've taken that mantle from the Cleveland Browns over the last 2 weeks. But what say you on Baltimore?
Yeah, I mean, it's climbed a good bit. I mean, it was 4.5 as of Monday or Sunday evening. So this has come up a good bit. I don't really think that there's huge injury concerns on either side here. So that just kind of seems to imply to me that a lot of the money was coming in on Baltimore early, and the line has corrected since. But at 6, I definitely understand the case for the Seahawks. But Lamar Jackson, we know what his record is against NFC opponents. They don't get to see him much more often than once every 4 years. So they have that advantage. They have the classic, 1 o'clock Eastern kick body clock advantage, although they just had to fly back across the country from Arizona in their own right. But I don't know. I feel like Geno Smith has not been playing quite as well this year, been a little bit more turnover prone, and that's an issue against a Baltimore team that's been clicking. Their defense is obviously excellent, as you alluded to there, and I think the offense, it showed last week, even if it wasn't like the most gaudy fantasy production day, especially from the passing game, it showed how multiple Baltimore can be, where they can just beat you by bludgeoning with the run game. I mean, Gus Edwards having the 3 touchdowns, that was huge. So I'm inclined to, even with the big number, to back the Ravens in this spot. They just do tend to be very strong at home. They're strong against NFC opponents. I know it's a lot of points, and the Seahawks are no pushover, but I think there's enough factors working in Baltimore's favor to where they cover this one.
Did see a good trend that would go against that, John. Not to undercut you here, but our friends at covers.com pass along Seattle 19-5 ATS as a dog of 4 or more since 2011. Meanwhile, the Ravens are 4-13 ATS in their last 17 games as a favorite of 4 or more.
Ooh, that's not good.
That's not good. It's not good. I don't know. I see this one. This kind of worries me as like a similar spot to like Rams Cowboys last week, where I was, it's like, all right, Dallas is the better team. We know that, but it's like, I could see the Rams sticking around. That game was over by the end of the first quarter. I don't know that we see that sort of lopsided result, but I like the Seattle team, man. They're first place in the NFC West right now. They're 5-2. It feels like 6 points, even on the road, even cross country, is a lot here. But we'll agree to disagree on that one. I think this means we might not be using it in Circa.
Okay, that we can agree on, I suppose, more if nothing else.
All right, we got another bird team in action. The Arizona Cardinals on the road at the Cleveland Browns. It's PJ Walker again here for the Browns. They are 8-point favorites at home, total 37.5. The reasoning, of course, for that, John, we got Clayton Tune. We got Clayton Tune going for the Arizona Cardinals. I'm not really sure what their plan is. They keep insisting that, hey, maybe it's Kyler Murray. He might play. I think the more you read into it, the more unlikely it is. I think that Kyler Murray plays this week. I think he could be back in week 10. Should mention, by the way, that Deshaun Watson was limited at practice Wednesday. Maybe there's a chance he comes back. I would almost rather see PJ Walker at this point. Not that he's been all that great, but I think this uncertainty with Watson and how he's looked, when he's tried to play through this injury, pretty small sample, but it wasn't great a couple of weeks ago. Big number for Cleveland with a backup quarterback. The defense has started to slip a little bit the last couple of weeks, but this feels like Josh Dobbs, I think, was a big reason why Arizona's been able to hang around and put up such a good fight, virtually every week. I think without him, without really knowing what we're getting from Clayton Tune, I'm inclined to back the Browns.
I'm with you there. It's tough to back PJ Walker with that many points, but I think that there's enough going for the rest of this Browns team. Their overall talent advantage versus the Cardinals here being such a huge factor here. Clayton Tune, someone that I'm interested in for dynasty purposes. I don't know if he'll ever find his footing in Arizona as long as Kyler Murray is there, but he's a player with a lot of moxie during his time at Houston. Put up some good numbers. Is a pretty athletic guy. Actually, can run a little bit. So I think if he gets flushed out of the pocket, he's not just a statue. But the Cardinals they lack so much in terms of talent, both on the back end of their defense and also pretty much across the board on their offense. So I'm looking for this. I'm just worried about the back door being open, just like it was a week ago. Basically the same number as what we were looking at for that Ravens game. But yeah, I mean, if we have to pick this one, it's got to be the Browns, and I feel actually pretty good about it. I think the Cardinals might struggle to even get to 10 to 13 points. Browns
are allowing under 13 points per game at home this season. That's really where, all of those all world level defensive performances have come. And, I was still a little bit disappointed in how that defense played a week ago, but I think they get back on track here. Blew a game to Seattle last week, but this feels like too good of a spot against Clayton Tune. Even if he ends up being a little bit frisky, 8 is a really tough number. I think we'll have to talk more about that one, see where it locks in Circa tomorrow afternoon. But yeah, I like the Browns here. They're the biggest favorite on the board this week. Let's move on to Rams Packers. My goodness. Green Bay is a 3.5 point favorite at home, John. And, I think the implication there is that we probably don't see Matthew Stafford. I think if Stafford were to be cleared for this game, he did not practice at all on Wednesday, not trending in the right direction. If he were to play, I think we could see a pretty significant swing. But as of right now, it feels like we're going to see Brett Rippon. I think I still like the Rams here. 3.5. I don't think Green Bay, based on what we've seen from the last 5 weeks, especially, I don't know that they should be handing any amount of points to anybody right now, even Rippon.
Right, and especially more than a field goal. They're just impossible to trust. That they're playing just a horrendous brand of football right now. I mean, that you're talking about a team that, they've lost to the Raiders, they've lost to the Broncos. They're a mess. They're just a mess.
They had so many opportunities at the end of that game last week, by the way, especially once Cousins went out. It ended up being a 2-touchdown final, but I mean, they recovered a fumble deep in Minnesota territory at the 15-yard line and went out on downs. They went out on downs with 6 minutes left, and then still got the ball back again and had a chance to cut it to a 1-score game and try to make something happen. I mean, Green Bay could not be playing worse right now. They just traded, one of their best healthy defensive players in Rasul Douglas. I think the secondary is going to be a disaster this week. It's already been a disaster. They're the worst coached defense in the NFL. That's been the case all year. Starting to kind of feel the same way about the offense at this point. They're a team that is just searching for answers really on both sides of the ball. And there's been no positive momentum. It's one thing to lose games and, put up points and you see flashes. It's like they get more and more depressing each week. And it feels like Jordan Love gets worse every week too. I don't really see it with Green Bay. And, even with Rippon, I mean, Rippon's 2-1 as a starter. Not that that's the greatest indication of anything, but it's not like you're throwing in, Nathan Peterman here. It's like, this is somebody who is at least capable, historically of game managing, of not losing you a game. And I think the Rams have advantages all over the place. I think, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua against this Packers defense, that would worry me quite a bit if I'm a Green Bay backer. Should note that Nacua was limited at practice Wednesday. I don't think it's, anything too major, just dealing with some swelling in his knee. That will be something to keep an eye on. If he were to be out, maybe that would swing me the other way, but yeah, 3.5, that's the key, right? If it was 3, if it was 2.5, it would be a stay away, but at 3.5, I like the Rams.
I like them too. Let's go with the Rams. Yeah, the Packers are just in a horrendous downward spiral. They've gotten healthier in recent weeks, and it hasn't really, at least on the offense, and it hasn't really paid much in the way of dividends. Jordan Love is just kind of a lost puppy right now. I've seen the name Sean Clifford be bandied about on Twitter, and that's pretty damning.
I don't think we sink that low, but man, I mean,
you can't.
It's they need to see something out of Jordan Love, and we could talk more about that on a later episode as far as what his future is. But for this week, we're on the Rams 3.5. Things are Things are dire right now in Green Bay. Buccaneers, Texans, John. Fun matchup here. Kind of a fun, bad game, I think, in some ways. Totals at 40. Neither of these teams have scored well of late. Both offenses are struggling. Houston, 2.5-point favorites at home. I labeled this the Nick Whalen stay away of the week in my article, which will be up on the site either later tonight or tomorrow morning, where I pick every game. I don't know what to do here, man. I think a lot of people saw, we're kind of predicting the upset last week in Carolina. We shied away from it in Circa. It was just a little bit too tight, and obviously came down to a game-winning field goal at the end. But that really felt like the first time all year where CJ Stroud was like vastly outplayed by Bryce Young of all people. Does CJ Stroud bounce back? Is this the week that the Buccaneers finally get back on track? I think these are two very, very similar teams to me.
Right, and I worry for the Houston offense going up against this Buccaneers defense. The Bucs defense is solid. If they can get Vita Vea back, that would be huge. But I thought that they held their own in Buffalo last Thursday night, and I think that they can absolutely do similar things. Take some notes away from what Carolina did to stifle that Houston offense. It was coming out of the bye, and they still couldn't get anything going against Carolina. They cannot run the ball whatsoever. So they basically they need to be ready for their secondary to be tested throughout the game. And they're going to need a secondary option beyond just Nico Collins to get going, because I think, Carlton Davis should be a good matchup against him. Can any of Tank Dell, Xavier Hutchinson, those types of guys step up, maybe even a Dalton Schultz potentially? They're going to need to get it going. Because I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball on the Buccaneers whatsoever. And I think the Buccaneers would probably be comfortable, like kind of almost selling out against the pass and still being able to stop the run. So the number is such that I don't want to include this on the card. But if I had to pick a side here, I probably would lean. I would lean Bucks.
Yeah, this is one where you just take the points, right? It's only 2.5. Yeah. It's not like it's a great number, but I want the points. And Houston, Houston's played some close games. They played some like weird score, like 21-19 type of games where it's like the 2.5, I think, could actually be pretty important here. And, neither of these teams can run the ball. We know that. I think that almost cancels out. But I like Tampa Bay's defense better on balance. I actually would give the nod to Houston in terms of quarterback play at this point. I think we've actually seen the real Baker Mayfield for the last few weeks here. But neither offense is playing well. Houston hasn't scored more than 20 points in over a month. Tampa Bay is averaging like 12.3 points per game over the last three. They're struggling to just get first downs. I mean, they're second to last in the league, in red zone conversion percentage. They've only had 17 red zone drives all season, which is wild. Second fewest in the NFL, but ahead of only the Steelers, who've had like 11, which is even wilder. But that is neither here nor there. I think we get a low scoring game. I think it's a stay away from a betting perspective, but I really like the under on 40 here.
Yeah, maybe that would be the play from this game, but picking this one against the spread is, like you said, and well titled, the Nick Whalen stay away of the week.
Yeah, which is wild because we have like two starting quarterbacks here, and I feel better about some of these like backup quarterback on backup quarterback games than I do teams that we should feel like we at least know here. But yeah, we're staying away from Bucs Texans. We're taking the under on 40. Commanders Patriots, John. Very interesting game for a number of reasons. Patriots giving 3 points at home. 40.5 is our total. I want to take the Commanders here. I think it's really difficult to evaluate the psychological, effects of trading away two of your, stud defensive ends in Sweat and Chase Young. It's like the message that sends to the team. How do you quantify that? I don't really know. New England has looked marginally better over the last couple of weeks. The offense was still pretty disastrous last week against Miami, but the defense has picked things back up. I really don't know where to lean here. I think I would just take the points with the Commanders on the road. I don't know that New England has even much of a home field advantage at this point. It doesn't feel like teams are fearing going into Foxborough. And with the Commanders, it's like even if they get off to a slow start, like there's always this promise that Sam Howell is going to throw them back into a game, right? I mean, they've proven twice now that they could score with teams like Philly. And, they've also had down weeks. They scored 7 points against the Giants a couple of weeks ago. So you never know, which Commanders team is going to show up. But much like the game we just discussed and even like Rams Packers, like I kind of want the points here between two teams that are very different, but also relatively equal.
I find myself disgusted at how much I like New England here.
Really?
Yeah, because, I mean, we're talking about a Washington team that was giving up the fourth most passing yards in the league when it had those stud defensive, ends, applying a little bit of pressure. Now those guys are gone. Their replacements are, not looking so great. So that secondary, even like it is the you can't say like unstoppable force, immovable object, but whatever the inverse of that would be when it comes to this Patriots passing game versus a Washington secondary that is just horrendous. So I think that we see one of the better Mac Jones games of the entire season. I think Sam Howell only getting sacked one time last week against Philly was an anomaly, one of the big anomalies of the entire season based on the trends that we've seen. He was on David Carr watch. I suppose he still probably is when it comes to overall sacks on the season. But I think that this is a good spot for Mac Jones and company to get themselves going. I know that it really hurts that Kendrick Bourne's going to miss the rest of the season. They're going to have to work in those tight ends. I think Hunter Henry, Mike Gesicki, those type of guys are going to have to be really involved here. Demario Douglas. But basically, I think Washington's defense is so bad that it's going to lead the Patriots to have one of their higher scoring outputs of the entire season. And if they have that type of momentum going in game, I think that they're just going to be able to pin their ears back and get after Howell and this bad offensive line and therefore cover this one. So if it stays at 3, I like New England. And even if it goes to 3.5, I think I still like the Patriots.
The Devontae Parker and Kendrick Bourne injuries are what holding me back a little bit here. Parker's still in concussion protocol. We'll see if he ends up playing. Bourne, obviously on IR. He's done for the year. I mean, we're down to Demario Douglas, Juju Smith-Schuster, Jalen Reagor. You might see some Kayshon Boutte even this week.
Yes.
It's a good spot for New England's offense. I don't disagree with you, but I just worry about the options that Mac Jones will be throwing to. I mean, they were bad before the Kendrick Bourne injury, and now,
right.
Especially if they don't have Parker, it goes from bad to worse. But yeah, you're right. I mean, maybe we just trust the New England defense at home here. I think this we probably go back to Sam Howell, starting a new streak of being sacked at least 5 times every week. That was one of the stranger anomalies. And if you watch that game against Philly, it's like it was competitive. Obviously, Philly ends up winning and covering barely by a touchdown. They also fumbled on the goal line on the tush push, and Kenneth Gainwell fumbled at the 3-yard line. I mean, they had 2 drives that should have not you can't even say turn into field goals, like should have been touchdowns, right? So maybe Washington's a little bit overvalued coming into the week.
Yeah, that game got sweatier. I know we're not totally recapping last week, but that game got a lot more dicey for us on the Eagles side than it needed to, for sure. Although it was pretty sweet to see them run a different play off of the tush push look. Oh yeah, that was sick.
Yeah, we've been waiting for that, right? And I'm actually kind of surprised they pulled it out there. Obviously, they needed to score at that point, but you'd think they'd kind of be waiting for that in a bigger spot. But yeah, nice kind of counterplay to DeAndre Swift for the go-ahead touchdown. So, all right, you're talking me into the Pats here. I don't love the number at 3, but I like your reasoning more than mine, which was basically just blindly take the points. So, yeah. All right, we'll side with the Patriots there. Bears Saints to finish out the early window, John. Saints 7.5-point favorites at home. They're playing at the Deuce McAllister Dome. The total is 41. There's maybe a ray of hope that Justin Fields could be back this week. The Bears put that out there. I don't think we see him. I think next week is the spot for Justin Fields. So I think we get kind of one final swan song here for Tyson Bagent. Bears coming off of just a pure beatdown against the Chargers. I think some people thought, Chargers are that team that lets teams into games and maybe the Bears could hang tough. That one, much like the Dallas game, felt like it was over a quarter in. Can the Bears pick themselves up off the mat here? They were buyers at the deadline. I don't know what that signals to this locker room, but the Saints finally feel like they have some semblance of momentum offensively. And, we're using that term pretty loosely when it comes to New Orleans because they've been as anemic as anyone, but scored well with the Jaguars despite, a terrible first half, had a big second half in that game, ended up coming up short, but then put up 38 on the Indianapolis Colts this past week, although everybody's putting up 30 plus on Indy lately. The question is, are they actually building something? Do we trust New Orleans in this spot? It's hard for me to put any faith in Bagent and this Bears team. Yes.
So I am expecting Bagent. If Justin Fields is wearing sunglasses on the sidelines, it means he's 2 weeks away at minimum. That's what the signal or that's what the sunglasses signify. This is known. But beyond that, I have been impressed by the Saints lately. I mean, I've gotten to, get eyes on them in that Jags game. Obviously, a frustrating end for them there with Foster Moreau dropping that potential game tying touchdown.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I mean, they definitely racked up some points last week, and I think that Alvin Kamara is running as well as I've seen him in a couple of years. Probably, I think that he looked great last week. He looked twitchy again, which like it felt like that had kind of gone away basically since Drew Brees retired, and they started just putting probably a little bit too much work on his shoulders. So he's looking good. Taysom Hill remains like this crazy X factor that they always have in their back pocket. And I think that the Saints defense is really strong. It's interesting that the Saints, what once vaunted for their performance at home are actually 0-3 against the spread at home. I think this is the spot that changes.
I think so too. I'm with you. I think this is a game where the Saints can afford to get off to a slow start. They can afford to make some of the Saintsy mistakes that they seem to make every single week. And I think against the Bears, you have enough wiggle room to get away with that and ultimately cover the 7.5. I mean, the Bears are 3-12-1 against the spread in their last 16 games. They're 6-15 against the spread in their last 21 road games. It's not a team that tends to travel well. If this game was in Chicago, I would think a little bit harder about it. But even with that trend that you mentioned, the Superdome has not exactly been a fortress over the last couple of years for the Saints. This is a spot that I like quite a bit. I think New Orleans has shown me just enough that, I don't think they're on the verge of like breaking out and running away with this division or anything like that. But I also think they're fully capable of dispatching teams like the Bears.
Yes. The Bears, I mean, like they bring in Sweat. Jalen Johnson, good on one side of the field as far as their secondary is concerned, but the Saints have a lot of options in their passing game. So even if Olave gets slowed down by Jalen Johnson, Michael Thomas, Rashid Shaheed, Juwan Johnson coming back, I think is a nice little addition that hasn't been talked about enough. So that plus Alvin Kamara just being a threat out of the backfield as a pass catcher too, like that, I think the Saints are to really be able to move the ball here. I'm kind of digging what I saw from the Saints last week.
Yeah,
very interested to see if that continues.
Yeah, they're a takeaway defense, right? I mean, they got 9 picks on the year. They got fumble recoveries. They are aggressive, and I think that bodes well against Tyson Bagent. All right, let's move to the late window. We got 3 games in the late window this week. Two kind of stinkers, although the one we're about to talk about, I think could be fun. Giants Raiders is the other, and then the marquee game, Cowboys Eagles. Colts at the Panthers, John. Colts are 2.5-point favorites on the road. Total is 44. I like the over on this. I mean, the Colts are hemorrhaging points over the last few weeks. They've given up 37, 38, 39 to the Jags, the Browns, and the Saints, respectively, in that span. Meanwhile, Bryce Young, he won the battle of top 2 quarterbacks in the 2023 draft last week, but I'm still pretty underwhelmed, with this Panthers passing game. For the most part, playing it safe, a lot of checkdowns, a lot of short passes. You give credit to Bryce Young for avoiding turnovers. That's been big. But, Carolina's 25th in passing EPA. They're 30th in yards per completion. They're 31st in yards per attempt. It's just not really an offense that takes a lot of chances. And the Colts are the opposite of that. I mean, they're hucking the ball all over the place right now. I think, if you want to beat the Colts, I don't care where this game is being played, you got to score. And I think Indianapolis is one of those teams that is going to get to, 27, 30 plus points on a lot of weeks, especially when they play teams like Carolina. And the Panthers are yet to score more than 27 in any game this season.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, they've been under 20 more often than they've been over 20. So I don't really trust Carolina to keep up with Indy offensively.
I know, like the initial inclination, especially with Carolina coming off the win, it's like, oh, they're giving points at home, but who's Indianapolis? But I think we're close. With the clock is drawing nearer to the Jonathan Taylor just complete explosion game, and it could happen this week. The passing game has been clicking. Pittman, Downs, even Alec Pierce a little bit getting going. They're putting up tons of points, like you said. And Carolina just is so conservative that if they go down early in this one, like it could be over. But beyond that, the Miles Sanders contract has not really worked out like they were hoping. And I thought that coming into the year, their plan would be to kind of keep the kid gloves on Bryce Young a little bit and just still be able to run the ball pretty well. That hasn't totally been the case. So we're just left with a really anemic passing game. That's it. And it's just basically Adam Thielen. So going into the teeth of this Indianapolis defense might not be the scariest thing in the world, but even still, I do like Indianapolis in this spot. I'm interested in this game. I think it could be fun.
Carolina's now dead last in rushing defense EPA on the year. They're allowing almost 140 rush yards per game. And, granted, the Colts haven't been a whole lot better. These teams are 1-2 in terms of rushing touchdowns allowed on the year. Colts have played one more game, so keep that in mind. But, yards per attempt, Carolina's almost allowing 5 to opposing running backs. I think you're right to point out, like, this might be the Jonathan Taylor and maybe even Zach Moss, together explosion week for the Colts. I'm a little bit scared of how much I like the Colts here, especially at 2.5.
Ooh, but I don't know. Should we be afraid or should we include it?
I think as of right now, we got to include it because we don't have a ton of options. You got to get to 5 picks for that Circa contest. So that will be one. That will be one that we will heavily discuss before locking those in this weekend. Giants Raiders, probably going to be a stay away, John. I think that goes without saying. Raiders 2-point favorites at home. We have on one side we have a team that threw for -9 passing yards last week. On the other side, we have a team that just fired its coach and GM and announced that it's also switching to Aiden O'Connell, seemingly for the rest of the year. I have no read on this game. I don't know how you possibly could. I think Daniel Jones is going to play for the Giants. That is certainly a boost, but Saquon Barkley also popped up on the injury report with an ankle. He was limited at practice on Wednesday. Darren Waller looks like he's not going to play, could be headed for a multi-week absence. Giants still super banged up on the offensive line. Now, the Giants defense has turned a corner. Like, they're playing a lot better the last couple of weeks, and that does worry me here. Ultimately, though, the question is for the Raiders, is this a galvanizing moment? Is this a team that now plays harder for Antonio Pierce, who now gets to go up against his former team? Or, is it a situation where there's just so much dysfunction that everybody kind of gets sucked into that? You see these situations go either way every year.
Yeah, I was unaware of Antonio Pierce's presence on that coaching staff. I remember he was on the staff for Herm Edwards at Arizona State over these last few years. That
vaunted staff at Arizona State.
It's just like a lot of former players with like no coaching experience. But Pierce has obviously climbed the ladder, and look at him now. But I would say that moving forward, this will be more galvanizing for the Raiders. I think McDaniels he must have just been hated in that locker room and in that building generally. So that could be a bit of a breath of fresh air. But I think what we saw, and certainly that you could apply this same logic on the other side with the Raiders defensive line going up against this kind of decimated Giants offensive front. But I thought that the Raiders, their offensive line was so abysmal on Monday night against Detroit, and the way that the Giants defense in the front seven and the pass rush have gotten going over these last few weeks, I think it could be more of the same. We saw Aiden O'Connell get just eaten alive by the Chargers in his first start earlier this year. We could have a similar issue here where the Raiders just, like, even if they have good matchups or good like personnel advantages, the offensive line is just going to let them down to where plays just aren't developing. They're taking sacks. You're getting into impossible down to go situations, and that just could be enough. So I like the Giants in this spot. I think that Daniel Jones coming back is somewhat helpful for the G-men here. So I will take the Giants on the road.
I think Jones being back is massive because the other option is DeVito, right? I mean, I don't think we can overstate like how big of a deal it is if Daniel Jones plays and starts this game, which I think he will. But I also have concerns kind of similar to what we talked about with New England, where it's like, all right, well, if there's no Waller, maybe you have a limited Barkley. Does it really matter who he's throwing to? It's like, I don't know, man. I don't know. And, as horrible as the Raiders were the other night, if Jimmy G just makes a couple of throws, like that is a much closer game and one that gets really dicey at the end for the Detroit Lions. So I think kind of lost in everything that's happened over the last 24 hours for the Raiders is that if Jimmy G just completes a couple pretty easy throws downfield, I think we feel a little bit differently about this team. I actually thought they hung in better than I expected at times with Detroit, but you're right. It's hard to erase, that final drive for the Raiders from your memory where Jimmy G was sacked, 4 times in like 6 plays? Yeah,
that was insane. I think Jimmy G doesn't get enough credit for being pretty tough. Like that guy gets hit a lot, and right, what a combo! It's like not even fair. But he stood in there and just took some absolute shots from the Lions. So obviously the Raiders are going to start going in a different direction going forward with Aiden O'Connell. I do kind of like Aiden O'Connell. I think he's definitely viable in super flex leagues this week. But as far as our betting concerns go, give me the G-men.
All right, that brings us to Cowboys-Eagles, John. Eagles getting 3 points at home. 46 is the total here. 3 seems about right, with the Eagles being at the bank. I'm inclined to back Philly here. I think the Eagles feel like they tend to show up for these big games. Like when they've been tripped up over the last couple of years, it's kind of come in spots that you wouldn't expect. I believe, John, we didn't really get a fair read on this matchup last year because we had Cooper Rush at quarterback for the first matchup, and then I believe it was Minshew for the second. So this will be the first Dak Hurts showdown of the last year plus. So there's not a lot of history to fall back on. Dallas coming in about as hot as they possibly could. Huge win over the Rams last week. CeeDee Lamb is officially back. Dak Prescott is playing well. But I also, every week, I struggle to understand how many people are so down on the Eagles. And it's almost like, all right, they have 1 loss on the year. And yes, it was ugly. It was against the Jets. They went through this phase where it just felt like they were committing these terrible turnovers every week. But to me, in a year where, it feels like teams are getting tripped up all the time, the Eagles have taken care of business as well as just about everyone. And it seems like the complaint is they're not dominating as much as they should, but for the most part, they're getting the results. And I know the defense hasn't quite been to the level that it was last year. But I think the Eagles show up in these spots, especially at home. I like Philly to cover 3.
I do too. I'm still dubious on the Cowboys. I'm not sure that they can beat the best of the best. I keep being surprised to see them in the top 5 of the Super Bowl odds standings. I'm not ready to buy in just yet. I think that they can do things like they did a week ago to the Rams, but they can also do things like their performance on that Sunday night game against the 49ers. Dak Prescott, I feel like it has been mercurial. He's either killer weeks in the good way or killer weeks in the bad way. Going to the bank, or I guess not the bank. That's the baseball stadium in Philly, but going to the Link.
The Link.
No. I'm feeling bad about it for the Cowboys. Give me the Eagles as well. I think we're in lockstep here.
Yeah, like Philly here at home. I think this is, like I said, they show up in these spots, and I think when push comes to, for lack of a better term, shove, John, they can clean up the turnovers. The turnovers are what are keeping some of these inferior teams in games that they have no business being in with the Eagles. I don't think they're fumbling twice inside the 5-yard line this week against Dallas. So give me the Eagles. Bills-Bengals, John, is our Sunday night game this week. We got a banger. I really like the Bengals here. I'm going to come out and say it up front. 2 points is our spread in favor of Cincinnati. 49.5 is the total. To me, Buffalo's the team that showed a lot more concerning trends. They're the team that has, still some big-time injuries on the defensive side of the ball, guys who are not coming back, whereas, for the 3rd straight year now, we're seeing Cincinnati feel like it's hitting that midseason push where they start to look like the best team in the NFL. And I know there were some plays that went their way, especially in the first half against the 49ers. Could have been a closer game. I still check that off as a really important and really valid win for the Cincinnati Bengals. And I don't want to kind of over buy into this team based on one result, but I also am pretty much willing to throw out how bad they looked early on, because it's night and day. It's not like Joe Burrow is this second year quarterback who we're still trying to decide if he's good or not. It's we know how good he is when he's healthy, and we saw that last week. If that's the guy we're getting going forward, I think Cincinnati's as good as anybody in the NFL.
Yes. We have 2 years of sample to draw on, 2021 and 22. The Bengals were, just shy of being the best team in football. So we know that they have it in them. The core remains mostly the same, if not a little bit better. They've had some guys on the defensive side really kind of start to develop, like Dax Hill. You have a pretty sick pass rushing duo of Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson. So the defense has some teeth to it. And I like the corner personnel as well. And then, you bake that in. I think that they're going to be able to throw a lot of things at Josh Allen that could knock him off his spot a little bit. And they can't really find the refuge in the run game. They just don't really have the bodies for that. I don't think, hot take of the year, that Leonard Fournette really changes the fortunes of this Bills team or its run game. So as long as they keep a lid on Stephon Diggs, I think they're in good shape here. And I think that this is a Bills secondary that can be picked on a little bit. No Tre'Davious White. We're about a month into him being out for the season, and the results haven't looked great. as far as that secondary is concerned. I think Burrow's going to be ready to pick them apart. And I think it was, what we saw from Jamar Chase is what we expect last week. And I think we started to see signs of life out of T. Higgins for the first time basically all season. So having multiple threats there, and Joe Mixon looked the best that he's looked all season as well. Everything was clicking for them. We'll see if they can kind of like find the chutzpah to do it 2 weeks in a row. But I don't think that they'll need a whole lot of extra motivation with this being a Sunday night game against a team that's kind of developing into one of their like AFC rivals.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rematch of the DeMar Hamlin game, right? I think both these teams have had this one circled as soon as the schedule came out. Cincinnati's defense to me continues to be underrated. I think it's pretty easy to fall into the trap of just talking about Joe Burrow and T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, but I actually would kind of give a slight advantage, I think, to the Cincinnati defense over what's left of the Buffalo defense at this point. I think you're right. I think this could be a game like last week where, Burrow's like 28 of 32, just super efficient, picking them apart. I mean, that was as good as Burrow's looked in a long time. Certainly this year. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was one of his better games that we've seen, in his entire career. And I think if he plays anything close to that, they're going to be in good shape. And the other thing that we haven't mentioned, John, Josh Allen, still banged up. We saw it last week for a moment. It looked like he was going to come out of the game, ended up playing through it, but still dealing with that shoulder elbow issue. Did not practice at all today. I'd be shocked if he doesn't play, but I still think there's a chance that he's not 100%, a good chance, in fact. And, with Allen, I think every hit he takes to that right side, there's always the risk of re-injury.
Yeah, there is. So that's a huge added concern for Buffalo, because if he's not Superman, I don't think they have a prayer here.
Right. Yeah. Cincinnati, I mean, give it 2 points. That's the best part here, right? If this was 3.5, you'd be like, all right, yeah, maybe not. But 2, I think this is a really, really nice line. I like this one a lot. Monday Night Football, Chargers, Jets. Chargers 3-point favorites on the road. Total is sitting at 40. Oh, man, what do we do here? I mean, this is just a Jets team that, who knows? We know the defense is going to be there. The offense, I mean, just won. They won one of the most unwinnable games that you will see in NFL history last week. Props to them, I suppose. Got the benefit of being able to spot the ball themselves on that last spike before the field goal, but we'll let that one be. Do we dare trust the Chargers here to cover 3 on the road against a good defense?
I don't think that last week proves anything for the Chargers. They are so far still out of the circle of trust. They need a game like this to make me start rethinking that. But until that happens, I just am going to continue to fade the Chargers against the spread. I think that this is a top tier Jets defense, that they're at home. Long trip for the Chargers. The Jets have been solid against the spread at home so far this year. I think they're just 3-1 thus far. 4-1 in MetLife Stadium overall because they were the road team last week. But that we just need like 20 points from the Jets here, and I think that they can get there. I don't think that this is a particularly impressive Chargers defense, and if Keenan Allen isn't popping off, if Austin Eckler isn't popping off, and I don't expect either of them to based on this matchup, then Justin Herbert's going to have to play at a level that we haven't really seen him do consistently against great defenses. So consider me a doubter still on the Chargers this year. I think Brandon Staley, kind of a doofus. And yeah, I like the Jets in this spot.
I think if the Jets could run the ball, they could win this game outright. That to me is what it comes down to. LA I don't think it's gonna be able to run at all. Austin Eckler's been back for 3 weeks, and he had a huge game fantasy wise last week. That was all through the air against a pretty bad Bears defense. I mean, 15 carries for 29 yards. Prior to that, 14 for 45 against KC, 14 for 27 against Dallas. And those are all actually reasonable run defenses, including the Bears. But I don't think he snaps out of that trend this week against the Jets. So to me, it comes down to can the Jets find ways to score points? Like you said, they're probably going to have to get to 20. I mean, even if it's not a great day for the Chargers offense, I think they have enough pieces that you can't, if you're the Jets, you can't expect to win this game 13-10. So they're going to need to run. I don't really trust Zach Wilson still whatsoever. I mean, it does feel like if they're in a hurry up situation, he's made some nice plays this season, but outside of that, he's still very much Zach Wilson. And the Jets are number 1 in the league right now in pressure rate. And I think that's kind of the one key. If Justin Herbert has time, he's going to look like a top 3 quarterback in the NFL, and he's going to dice you up. if he doesn't have time and you're getting to him and he's going down 4 or 5 times over the course of the game, I think that's the Jets' window into this.
There it is. So I think that all those factors are enough to point me in the direction of the Jets. And not only do I think the Jets cover this one, but I think they win outright.
All right. Before we talk some Survivor, hand out our locks of the week, it is football season at Circa Resort and Casino in Las Vegas, featuring the best pool in history, Stadium Swim. 3 levels, 6 pools, and a 143-foot diagonal screen. Stadium Swim is America's favorite place to watch football. They play every game from college to the pros. You can catch all the action poolside from a variety of seating options, including cozy day beds, private temperature-controlled cabanas. They got their own TVs in there, too. It is fantastic down at Stadium Swim. It's located at Circa Resort and Casino, and it's open 365 days a year. That's not normal, John. A lot of Vegas pools, this time of year, they'll be closing up for a few months. No, not Stadium Swim. 365 days a year, all sports, all seasons. Book today at circalasvegas.com. That's circalasvegas.com. All right, let's run through some quick Survivor options for Week 9. We say it every week at this point. We don't know who you have left. It's tough to just say, all right, use this team because you might have already used them. To me, Cleveland, New Orleans, those are probably the teams I would trust most, and I would probably put New Orleans first. Beyond that, it's getting pretty dicey. Maybe Atlanta, going up against what we think will be Jaron Hall and Minnesota. Outside of that, am I missing anything obvious?
I don't think so, because everything else has a pretty narrow spread. I think even as confident as I am, say, in like the Patriots this week, I'm not ready to plunk down in Survivor for them. In the one main Survivor pool that I do, once you get to Week 9, you got to pick 2. So it's a great wrinkle. It creates some separation within the pool, so not everyone always gets knocked out at once. You can kind of prove yourself over the course of the season a little bit more. And boy, this is tricky, but I'm glad that I have Cleveland and Atlanta available. I think that those are my 2, but New Orleans is also very appealing. But I went Survivor the other week against the Bears, and it went poorly. So I'm a little bit scared of them, even though I do objectively like the Saints against the spread.
My parlay of the week for NFL Week 9: Atlanta Falcons -4.5, Cleveland Browns covering 8, and we are taking the under on 40 in the Buccaneers Houston Texans game. So that is Atlanta and Cleveland to cover, and we're going under 40 on the total for Tampa Bay and Houston. I know you got 2 parlays lined up, John, so I will clear the floor for you.
Yes, I have a couple here, a couple of 3-leg ones. One pays out about 6-1, so your classic 3 picks, -110 odds. That's Atlanta -4.5, Baltimore -5.5, although that number is 6 now, so I might need to reconsider that. And New Orleans at -7.5. Going a little bit further, a little bit bigger, we got +793 odds, so just about 8-1. The Rams covering 3.5 on the road, +3.5. That is the Jets money line, and then Cincinnati -3.5. That gets you about 8-1.
Ooh, look at you! And I mean, you might be able to get that Cincinnati price a little bit better now too, down at 2. Jets money line. That is saucy stuff, John. I like it. That's what it takes, though. You want to get to 8-1, you got to take some chances. That's right. All right, teaser of the week. We're throwing another 7-pointer out there. Man, we hit 2 out of the 3 last week, John, and the Chiefs. We teased them down to even. All they had to do was win that game. As we know, they did not win that game. So we're back to the well on the teaser. Seattle, we're teasing them up to +13. They just got to cover 13 against the Ravens. We are teasing the Browns down to -1. So just hopefully win that game. It doesn't come down to a 1-point game. And we're teasing the Commanders up to 10 against the New England Patriots. I think we get a close game one way or the other there. So Seahawks +13, Browns -1, Commanders +10.
I like it. I think the only liability I could see there is probably the Seahawks. Like if it gets away from them, it could get really bad. But I don't see a blowout, even if the Patriots do win and cover that game. So getting that 10-point cushion is nice. And then the Browns, knocking on wood here, but they're not going to lose that game.
All right, John, who are we locking up this week?
Give me the Bengals. It fits my season-long narrative of being a little bit dubious on the Bills, and I really am sold that the Bengals are about to go on a pretty serious tear here. So I think that last week was just the beginning of something pretty crazy from Cincinnati as we go forward.
I got the Bengals as well. We're locking up the Bengals -2 Sunday night against the Buffalo Bills. I was trying to even come up with a secondary lock. It's tough, man. Maybe the Eagles at 3. I like that one as well. I don't love the number quite as much, but getting the Bengals at 2 is big. I would love to say I could confidently lock up the Taylor Heineke Falcons to cover 4.5 at home against Minnesota. But it is the Falcons. They're almost in Chargers territory for me at this point, where you can't, like, I don't care what the number is. I mean, they could be like +70, and I'd be like, I don't know, probably stay away.
It's they are they're a frustrating bunch. They win at home, they never cover at home. It's tough.
It is what it is. All right, man, that'll do it for us this week. Thank you for those of you who hung out and watched live as we broke down every game for week 9 of the NFL season. Best of luck to everybody betting this weekend, John. Looking forward to catching up with you this weekend, watching some football, and should be a good time. We'll be back. Should be Thursday next week on our normal schedule, talking NFL Week 10. Good luck this week.